video, I'll talk more on the consumption function. Consumption function, right? So in my previous video, I had talked about aggregate demand being equal to C plus I, since I was considering just two sectors of the economy, consumption and investment. And I tried to explain that how consumption is related to income and how investment is related to income, right? So here I'll go a little deep into what a consumption function is like. Okay, first I'll just draw a very simple diagram or a graph, what you say, and I'll just show you how do we go about it. So here we have consumption, right? Okay, if you have seen my previous video, it's like, if you have watched my previous video, it's like the consumption function is like this, right? It goes like this. So that's a consumption function. And we talked about that this is nothing but your consumption level even when your income is zero. All right. And we also talked about in a previous video about this 45-degree line, right? So where your AD is equal to your Y. All right. So that's your 45-degree line. Okay. So now what I'm trying to tell you is that this is my consumption function. So I can write actually a consumption function in an equation form, right? Explaining you everything here. So when my consumption function, I can say C is basically the C bar, that is, even when my income is zero, I have a minimum amount of consumption of goods and services. As I explained, this consumption of goods and services can come from your savings. It can come from your borrowings. If you borrow from someone, it can come from by selling an asset to someone, right? So if you have something to sell, you can earn money, and then you can finance your consumption here, right? Okay, otherwise your consumption is basically a function of your income. So as your income increases, so does your consumption, goes on and on. It increases, right? So I can say that consumption function is basically your C bar plus a small c, or I can write B, whatever you want to write, whatever letter you want to take, whether C or B or whatever, is a function of your income, right? So in some books, honestly, your consumption function is also written as C plus C. Why? This lowercase c and lowercase b is the same. Okay, I'll come to that later, what is it called, but it's the same. So some books write this, some books write this, some books may write something else, but the meaning is the same. So it basically says that as your income increases, your consumption also increases by this, right? So this is basically the slope of your consumption function. So B is nothing but slope of the consumption function, right? Okay, now this B is called nothing but marginal propensity to consume, in short MPC. Okay, it's a slope. So a slope basically tells you the change, right? So slope tells you that if your income increases by a unit, by let's say $1 or 1 rupee, then by how much will your consumption increase? Okay, so I'll repeat that again. MPC is basically the slope. So it tells you that if your income increases by ₹1, then by how much your consumption increases. Okay, that's your MPC. So it basically gives you the change. So your MPC is nothing but equal to the change in income, sorry, the change in consumption that you get by the change in income. So if your income increases by rupee 1, then by how much your consumption increases. That's what your MPC gives you. Okay, increase basically, remember. So this is not that your income is this and your consumption is this. That's not MPC. MPC is basically the change. So if your income is increasing by 100 rupees, let's say, then by how much your consumption will increase. That's your MPC, right? And since we know that it's a positive relation, that as your income increases, then your consumption also increases. So your MPC is between 0 and 1. So it's a positive number and it's greater than 0, but it's less than 1. Sorry, I'm just mixing this up. It could be B, it could be C, right? As I told you earlier. That's your MPC. Okay. All right. Coming back to the diagram, what does it say? So now if I want to write this consumption function, I'll write this as C bar plus BY. Right. That's my consumption function denoted by this line. So this is C bar and it's a function of Y with respect to this B or MPC, marginal propensity to consume. So as your income increases, your consumption also increases, but since it's less than 1, so your consumption increases by less than the increase in your income. That's another important point to understand. Right? So if your income is increasing by a unit, your consumption will increase by less than a unit. In other words, if it increases by 1 rupee, then your consumption increases by less than a rupee. That's what this means, being MPC being less than 1. All right. Okay, now in this diagram, one more thing I can draw is basically that this, let's say, this level of consumption when my income is 0 is financed by my savings. So this is the amount I am basically saving, right? Since my savings are lowering down, they are diminishing because I'm consuming those savings in order to finance my consumption. So this is a part of my saving. Or in other words, you can also see it like this, that since my consumption function is above my income level, so I am saving in order to finance my minimum level of consumption. Now this is the point where my consumption is exactly equal to my income. So my savings are 0 here. So here this implies my savings are 0. All right. And here, since my income is higher than my consumption, then this is my part of savings. All right, do you understand this? Okay, so that's important. So again, I'll repeat for consumption function. Consumption function is C bar plus B of Y, or it could be C of Y in many books. But what you have to understand is that this B or C is nothing but the slope of the consumption function. A slope is basically your, what we call is as marginal propensity to consume, or MPC. Now this MPC lies between 0 and 1, which basically means that it cannot be 0, right? I mean, that's a very hypothetical situation where we say that MPC is 0, which basically means that if my income increases by 1 rupee, then I am not consuming anything, right? My MPC is 0. I am saving the entire thing, right? And if I say that my MPC is 1, then it basically means that if my income increases by 1 rupee, I am just consuming entire 1 rupee. I am not saving at all, right? So that's, both are actually not very realistic. So your MPC lies between the two, right? So if your income increases by rupee 1, then your consumption increases, but by less than rupee 1. That's what you have to really understand. And it's a slope. It tells you the change. So remember this. It tells you the change. Okay. All right. Then what we have is another concept in this, which is basically called, which is basically called APC. That's your average propensity to consume. Okay, so this is called your average propensity to consume. That's called APC. Now APC is given by nothing but your consumption at a particular income level, right? So if I say that your income level is, if I say income level is 100, and if I say at that point of income level your consumption is 60, then my APC is given out to be 60 divided by 100, which gives me in percentages 60%, right? So it basically tells me that 60% of the income is spent on consumption. That's it. It's at a point. Okay, that's the difference. So APC is at a point. APC just gives you this. So at my income level of this, my consumption is this. So that is if my income level is 100, then 60% of that is consumed. Okay, this is at a point. However, your MPC is the change in consumption and your income, right? Remember that. So if, to give you a hypothetical example, let's say if my income was 80 right earlier, and it increased to, let's say, 100, and consumption was 60 and it increased to 75, okay, then I have to calculate my MPC in this. So change in consumption by change in your income. So change in consumption is how much? That's 15, and change in income is 20, right? So that gives me equals to 0.75. Now this basically tells me that for 75% of incremental income is spent on consumption. Okay, this tells me 75% of incremental income is spent on consumption. In other words, in simple words, it basically means that if my income increases by rupee 1, then out of that 75 paise I spent on consumption. That's what it means. If it increases by rupee 1, then 75 paise I spent on consumption. Okay. However, in this case, your APC will be calculated at each of these points, right? So your APC will be at a point. So for this case, the APC would be your 60 divided by 80, and for this it would be 75 divided by 100. This is at a point. This is your APC. Okay. However, your MPC will tell you the change, that if your income increases by a certain proportion, then by how much will your consumption increase. Okay, it's a very, very important concept. Marginal is a very important concept in economics, so please understand this, right? So that's the difference between APC and MPC, and that's what I wanted to cover in this video. All right, so hope you understand this. See you next time. Bye bye.